Hi, I'm Sandra Whitehead. I'm the program director at the Sustainable Urban Planning program here at GW. Today I'm going to share some slides with you and talk about the literature review process as part of your capstone. So each student has to perform a capstone as part of their work here at Sustainable Urban Planning. It is the ultimate project where we determine whether or not each student has met our program objectives. And part of that is the literature and practice review. So why do you want to do a literature and practice review? Your literature review summarizes the current and past scholarship that's important to the issue that you're writing about. It should discuss the schools of thought, the relationship to theory, and compare and contrast approaches that can be applied to your project. The practice review should focus on the gray literature, such as planning magazine, think tank websites, association publications, technical publications, interviews with practitioners if that's appropriate to your topic. And your practice review should relay examples and approaches being used currently and what can be learned from them or applied to your project. So the literature review is designed to help familiarize you and your reader with your topic, scholarship in the field, and to give you an idea of where current scholarship stands. Through this, you'll discover gaps in the existing literature in order to propose new projects and or develop your theoretical framework and methodology for your project. The purpose of writing literature is to present the sources that you've used to research to your readers and to justify your point of view. So during your literature review, you're communicating several things. Your research methodology, and I don't mean for your whole paper, I mean for your literature review. What kind of keywords did you use? What data did you look at? What sources? How did you choose those? How did you analyze the data that you collected? So if you are looking at adaptive reuse, for instance, how did you choose which articles applied to your topic and which did not of the 5,000 adaptive reuse articles that are out there? What theoretical framework you're using for your paper. So in your literature review, you'll look at the different theoretical frameworks that have been applied to your topic, and you'll decide whether you want to use one of those, whether you want to create a new one, or if, and what your logic is for that. So how does your work fit into the bigger picture of scholarship that's already been done on this topic? How it relates to other pieces of research, how it fills in any gaps, and any debates that it contributes to. So your literature review process is multi-pronged, right? You collect the articles on your topic, you read them, you summarize the state of research, you identify gaps, relationships, and variances, and you suggest next steps. So how do you identify articles? Think about your keywords. Think about using Google Scholar. There are classes that are online at the Gell-Mann Library. There are also tips and tricks. You can also meet with the librarian. Pull the articles that you find on your topic, and then use the abstracts of those articles to decide whether or not you want to read the full article. Does this actually apply to your specific topic, or is it a global article on the larger topic, right? And use those abstracts to decide which articles you're going to include and what you're going to exclude. Write down your steps. I found 3,423 articles that related to adaptive reuse and using that for restaurants and food deserts. Of those 3,400 articles, I read all the abstracts, and of those, 76 pertain to my particular project. I read the full article of those 76, and of those, 22 were actually useful to me. That's sort of the summarize. And then you'll take those 22 articles and summarize what they said. And then the next piece of that is, how do those work together? Do they form a clear body of literature that doesn't have gaps? Are there relationships between the different articles and the different frameworks that people use for those articles? And what are the variances? And so thinking about that process, you'll have your literature review and be able to suggest some next steps and how your article or your project fits in. So literature review is structured kind of like an essay, right? It has an introduction, it has a body, and it has a conclusion. Making sure throughout your literature review that you're watching your tense to distinguish between your analysis and prior scholarly work. Use the past tense when discussing previous research conducted on your topic, and the present tense when talking about your point of view. For example, if you're writing that a specific author conducted research and that they've been influenced by earlier researchers, but also that you're exploring different research methods that you're proposing. If you haven't narrowed down your research focus to a specific question, that's okay. You don't have to do that before you start reading. But once you have a clear and specific thesis for your work, write a list of your keywords, right? And keep track of these as you're doing your preliminary reading so that you don't have to do the same work twice, right? You can streamline your source gathering process. Using the keywords, search for relevant sources through the library or databases, as I said, Google Scholar, JSTOR, EBSCO, or other specific databases that you're using. And then find the potential sources, read the abstracts, and make sure they're in the scope. And by doing the quick preview of each one, you can pare down the articles that you have to read in full. Organize your annotated bibliography. This is very important. You can use a citation manager like Zotero or RefWorks. These are all on the library's website at the libguides.gw citation. There are also style guides there. Usually students use the APA style, but MLA or Chicago are also acceptable, as long as you're consistent. Identify themes, gaps, and patterns, right? As you're reading your pared down body of research, the articles, the ones that you're going to read the full thing of, what are the themes? And ask the questions, do the authors agree with each other on these themes? Where do they disagree? How does each author support their position? So examine the research methods each author used in their work. If your sources involve studies or experiments, note whether the results were replicated and how the studies varied from each other. Write down your insights from each source and how it contributes to the existing pool of knowledge on that topic. And think about doing this on either note cards or in your RefWorks or Zotero platform, or even on a spreadsheet. Think about what works for you. Create your outline. Writing your outline for your is important. So thinking about the sources that you've read and the patterns and themes and their connections to each other, organize your strategy for writing and how you found them by creating an outline. Introduction of your lit review is what explains your working topic and your thesis. It forecasts the key topics or text as they will appear in the review and describes the sources that you found, how you analyze them for inclusion, whether you included them or excluded them in your review, and the discussion in the review. What did you find? So making sure that you're keeping the introduction and the discussion separate. In the introduction, you'll talk about previous literature to introduce your research. You'll discuss the specific literature after the general introduction. and then identify knowledge gaps. Your discussion section should discuss the the findings of the papers and reinforce what you found. And they should only include references that are directly relevant. Don't talk about papers that you excluded. And you don't have to cite review articles unless they're essential. If you find a systematic review that exists, you can use that. Your discussion section should be where you summarize and synthesize. You should give an overview of the main points of each source and combine them into a coherent whole using the themes and through lines. Relate it to practice. How are these concepts implemented? And then analyze and interpret. Don't just paraphrase what the other researchers have said. Use your own thoughts and interpretations. And where it's important, discuss the significance of the findings in relation to the overall literature that exists. There are different ways to organize your review. Chronological is looking at the articles as they came out by year. Thematic is taking the different themes that you found and organizing the papers that address those themes, or methodological, papers that use the same methodology types. So chronological, as I said, is probably the easiest way, the most straightforward way, because you're starting with the very first paper that was ever written on brownfields, for example, and you're moving forward through the next 30 years and discussing those. If you choose this strategy, be very careful that you're not just listing and summarizing sources in order. Try to also analyze patterns, turning points, and key debates. If you're using the chronological method, think about the movements in urban planning and how your topic has evolved through those movements. So if we're thinking about brownfields, for example, that started out as only looking at economic development, and then it has moved over time of including some health outcomes. And over in the last 10 years, it's really started to focus on equity and public health in the outcomes and not just economic outcomes. So thinking about the key debates and the turning points, and give your interpretation of why these developments occurred and why this was a turning point. Thematic, if you found some really cool central themes and working throughout your piece, organize it in subsections that address the different themes. So for example, if you're looking at women in religion, key themes could be the role of women in churches and religious attitudes towards women. Methodological, if you draw your sources from different disciplines, and planning is very interdisciplinary, these articles might use a variety of different methods. So think about, qualitative versus quantitative, empirical versus theoretical, or you might even do it by category, sociological, historical, or cultural resources. The last section of your literature review is your conclusion. So summarize the key findings that you've taken from the literature and practice, emphasizing the significance, and connect that back to your primary research questions and how you apply it in the paper. There are some really great examples out there, and these are also posted. So that is what I have for you on literature reviews. I hope this has been helpful to thinking about the very first section of your capstone.